Today's video is for the new sawmill owner, primarily, who just got a sawmill. And if my voice sounds kind of funny, it's because I created a whole lot of dust using this planer. And by the way, the dust collection on the planer, better than the Ryobi, by a long shot. So I'm not totally dogging on the Vevor here. I think it's a good planer for the money. But anyway, back to the sawmill. So you got a new sawmill, new, used, whatever, and you're a bit of a woodworker. And the first thing I see people asking on the forums or the groups, in social media is, how long should I dry my logs? Folks, you don't dry your logs before you saw them. And I see this all the time. So when you get a sawmill and you cut down a tree and you think, well, how long should I let that tree sit? No, don't let it sit at all. If you let that log sit on the ground for an extended period of time, or off the ground even if you debark it and you do everything you can, the problem is the ends are going to dry. First and foremost, cutting that log down, you have opened up those end grains. They're going to release the water. You can seal them with anchor seal, and that's going to give you a lot more time. But honestly, you do not want your logs to dry. They get harder as they dry. You've probably heard of the Jenga scale and how hard one type of wood is or another. When wood's dry, they get harder. So when I was trying to plane that Brazilian cherry, well, guess what, folks? It's been kiln dried. It's hard as a rock. But if it was fresh and green, it wouldn't be. It might be hard, but it's not that hard. So the first thing I'm going to tell you is you do not need to dry logs before you mill them. In fact, you want to mill them green. And there are several reasons for this. So of course, you want to seal the ends. You want to anchor seal them. Paint is, some guys use paint, I guess, if you put it on real thick, but it's not as good as anchor seal. Anchor seal has beeswax impregnated into it. That wax clogs up those pores on the end of the log that you've cut open with a chainsaw and prevents the water from wicking out and drying the ends faster, which is what causes checking. And checking is when the end of the log begins to crack. And it cracks because as that log on the ends shrinks in size, right? Things shrink when they dry. This part of the log hasn't shrunk because it's still wet. So the end tries to shrink, and what happens is it has to pop apart. It's got to split apart. That's called checking, and it will literally crack, and it'll go deeper and deeper and deeper into that log unless you stop that drying or mill it. Now, why does milling it green matter? First of all, when you mill that log up into boards, they're green, wet, heavy green lumber. That's why they call it a green chain in the big sawmills. That lumber is full of moisture. And if there's stress in the log, it's going to want to move too. You take that and you put it in a stack, and we call this sticker stacking. Maybe you lay out some, if you're doing it like I do out in the woods somewhere, you lay out some pallets on the ground, you make sure they're on the same plane. They don't have to be perfectly level, but you don't want them twisted, right? You don't want them like this or like this or like this. You want them on that same plane. The plane can be a little bit this way or a little bit that way or a little bit this way, but it needs to be on the same plane. And you set down stickers. Now, stickers are typically 3/4 of an inch thick by 1 inch wide. That's kind of the industry standard, but I've used everything down to 1/2 inch thick and 3/4 of an inch wide to, I know some guys have used inch thick and 1.5 inches wide. But you take these stickers, again, 3/4 by 1 inch, you put them as close to the ends as you can for this milled lumber. And at first you're gonna put them on the pallets, right? And then you set them every 18 inches. Now, some will say you can get away with 24 inches. I'm sure you can, I just never have. I've always done about 18 inches. So you go right to the ends, as close to the end of that lumber as you can, and you go 18 inches again and again and again until you get to the other end and right to the very end. All right? As close to the end as possible. And you lay your lumber down with approximately 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch gap between each piece of lumber that you've laid on the stickers. Then you set your next stickers directly on top of the first ones. That way you don't want to stagger them. If you stagger them, your boards can go like this. So you want them, if you laid your sticker here and then you put your boards on here, your next sticker goes directly on top of that. They should be straight up and down in a row on the ends and every 18 inches. That way, all of the weight of that lumber is actually on the stickers, not the lumber itself, right? The lumber is just a spacer between each sticker. What that does is it ensures that those boards aren't going to go like this between the stickers, which they would do if you put a sticker here and a sticker here and a sticker here, okay? Don't do that. Now, I mean, I'm not the most anal when it comes to putting stickers in. Some guys will make them perfectly lined up all the way up and down. I get them really stinking close, but they're not perfect. And that's okay, it works. Now, what you've done, when you sticker stack your lumber, let's say you get a stack that's 4 feet tall, you now have a stack of lumber that air can easily move in and around and out of, okay? On top, you sticker again, then you put some kind of platform, plywood or something that you can put weight on, and you put as much weight as you can. And you put some sort of waterproof roof over it. You can use tarps, I've done that. Plastic's not the best, even 6 mil, plastic, the clear stuff will just disintegrate in the sun. So not the best. Black lasts longer, but it will still just come apart eventually. So you put this roof over it, and the roof should hang over, maybe a 12 inches or so on either side at most, and we're about 12 inches on the ends at most. That's it, right? And you do not want to drape it down the stack of lumber on the ends or the sides, because what that will do is it will stop the wind from moving around it. How lumber dries is as it warms up throughout the day, and it can do this in freezing temperatures too, folks, believe it or not. I've dried lots of lumber in the middle of winter, it dries fine. It releases moisture during the day, and because the wind can move through that stack, it draws that moisture away from the lumber, so that at night, when it would normally draw that moisture back in, which is what it would do, it gets warm, the moisture vaporizes, right, like steam, the wind carries it away, now it can't go back into the lumber. And over a period of weeks, it will dry it down somewhere around your general humidity in the area. So where I'm at, up in the mountains, where I do most of my drying at, it's not uncommon to see, moisture content at 16% after 8 to 10 weeks. It's amazing. Now I live in a pretty dry, arid climate, so that can happen. We don't have real high humidity. If you're in a real high humidity location, it'll still dry down, but it may not dry down quite as much as it does for me here, but if you put some fans on it, that would also help. In the end, you're probably going to have to use a kiln. Now, when you do this, you're doing a couple things. You're not just drying the lumber, but you're controlling how the lumber dries. The weight prevents that lumber, when it's moist, it's wet still, it's green, from moving a whole lot. Once it's dry, it's not going to move anymore. So you want to prevent it from moving while it's drying. And that's why you see guys will band up sticker stacks sometimes. They'll use ratchet straps. I just use weight on top. It works fine for ponderosa pine. But you're not only drying the lumber, you're controlling how it dries, which is going to prevent some of the movement you will get during that process. If you let your log dry out already, now it's harder. It's already done all the movement it's going to do. It's checked, and it could even start rotting. None of those are good. And these sawmills, they're not designed to mill dry stuff. Now you can get carbide tip blades for like $100+ a band, but they're not designed for cutting bark and dirt and whatever else you're going to run into. Yes, apparently you could resharpen them. I don't know if you could put teeth back on them. I'm not buying bands that cost me that much. Maybe they're $150 now. No way, thank you. I'm buying my standard double hard 7-degree bands, and I can run them all day long and get them resharpened several times, and I don't have any problems. Okay? All right, so that's why you don't dry your logs. You dry the lumber. There's no seasoning of the logs. It's not like firewood. Okay? Mill them green. Greener is better. Now, another thing I wanted to address that was on the forums, it's in the groups a lot, is how much do I charge for something? I got to tell you that I'm really surprised by how many times guys come in and they post, hey, what should I charge for a 1x6 or 1x8 or 1x12 or whatever, or 4x8 beam? I'm not going to fault you for coming on and asking people that. I mean, if you don't know, best way to find out is to ask. But a lot of guys comment about business practices when you do that, because they're looking at that and they're thinking to themselves, this guy doesn't even know what it costs him to make that board. And pricing something that you're going to sell has to be based in what it costs you to make the board in the first place. If it isn't, you're probably going to lose a lot of money, or you're just lucky. So here's what I'm going to tell you. Number one, doing research is good, and you can do that easily by going to a big box store and pricing all their lumber out that's the same as what you're selling. I'm not telling you you're going to sell it at that price. Good luck. But you can start there and say, okay, that's what they're selling it for. Then you can go online, and Craigslist's one place you can do this, and search 1x6 cedar or pine or Doug fir or southern yellow pine or whatever it is you're selling, and see what guys are selling for it there. You can get online and look for those specialty shops that sell stuff. How much is walnut? Well, let's see. 2x12 or live edge walnut for sale. Hit go. DuckDuckGo search engine. Now you don't want to use those other ones. And you'll find guys selling it. And you can take those prices and say, okay, it's between $1 and $25 a board foot. What did it cost you? So you need to figure out, if you bought logs, you need to figure out what those logs cost you. Then you got to figure out how much time it took you to mill all that wood. If you're selling it green, okay, then you don't have to figure in drying time, but you might have to if you stacked and stickered it. You got to figure your time, all of your time. And then you got to price in your mill and your maintenance and everything else. So I'm going to tell you that pricing your lumber is no different than pricing your service. You charge 40 cents a board foot or 150 bucks an hour or whatever it is you charge. You're gonna do that for a reason. I did a video a while back, a year and a half ago, about charging for remote milling. And I was talking about, I charge 100 bucks an hour. Of course, that's got to go up. But at that time, it was $100 an hour. And this is why. And I explained that I wanted to make a certain salary, but my business needed money in order to pay for maintenance and all those kind of things. And Uncle Sam is going to get his cut eventually too. In the beginning, he might not, because you're going to have tax breaks. But eventually, you're going to have to pay Uncle Sam too. So how do you factor that all together? You should know what your hourly rate is to run your sawmill. And you need to get that in order to make a profit, right? So if your rate, let's say for you to make a $29 an hour or $30 an hour wage, you need to charge 40 cents a board foot. Let's just use that as an example, okay? If you mill 1,000 board feet of lumber, then your wholesale cost on that lumber, even if it's for yourself, is the cost of buying the logs, unless they were free, but there's really no free. Maybe somebody gave you logs, and in that case, maybe they're free. But if it's on your land, it ain't free. You better find out what it costs to buy, 1,000 board feet of pine from a logger, and then price your logs the same way. So you take your 40 cents a board foot, that's your cost that you need to make to be profitable running your sawmill. And then you take the cost of the logs, let's say they're 20 cents a board foot. So your wholesale cost for 1,000 board feet would be $600. Standard practice would be to mark that up 100%. So therefore, for 1,000 board feet, it would be $1,200, or $1.20 per board foot. And if you were to do that, you would be sorting out your pricing so that it's profitable for you. Because I'm going to tell you right now, there's lots of guys that sell lumber that really isn't profitable. They get away with it. Maybe they've already paid for their mill from remote milling. Maybe they just don't know better. Maybe they live in a really cheap environment. Who knows? But you have to figure out what it costs you to run your business. And that my 40 cents an hour can assume that the mill's paid for. I mean, if it isn't, I might have to be a little more than that. So you got to be realistic with yourself. What does it cost to run your business? If you're going to remote mill, what would that look like? Even if you don't do it, figure it out. On the third model, if you wanted to make $30 an hour, then you need to charge $90 an hour for any job. That's 30 for you, 30 for Uncle Sam, 30 for your business. Okay? So if you work, 100 hours in a month, 30 times 100 is 3,000, right? So 30 times 100 is $3,000. That's how much your business would make for its own maintenance. That's to pay for the sawmill, to pay for fuel, to pay for band sharpening, to pay for repairs and maintenance and everything else. So $3 grand a month, 12 grand a year. If it costs you $48,000 to buy a mill, well, it's going to take you 4 years to pay for it if you worked 100 hours a month. Now, there's usually 160 to 170 hours a month of actual working time, so you might be able to shorten that time down a little bit, or you could do like I did. You work a full-time job and you mill on the side. Pay your mill off in just over a year. But you need to know the cost. And if you take that cost of how much it takes for you to run your business and pay for your sawmill, your truck, your maintenance, your fuel, all those things, and you take that figure and you figure in your own wage how much you need to make, $30 an hour. So if it's 30 to run your business and $30 an hour is what you want to earn, that's 60. You take the same amount to set it aside for Uncle Sam. You might not pay any of that in the first few years because of the write-offs that you're going to have for starting your business, but that can go back into your business as well to help make it very profitable. So let's say you're doing $120 an hour and you can mill 300 board feet in an hour, then you've got to do the math on that. Let's do that. Okay, $120 divided by 300 board feet equals 40 cents a board foot. So it's 40 cents a board foot. 120 bucks an hour, 300 board feet an hour, 40 cents a board foot. So if you've got 1,000 board feet, your cost is $400. That means you'd need to sell it $800 in order to make a decent profit off of it. And that's just what you got to do. And you could do that for everything, right? If you're milling, black locust, maybe you don't get 300 board feet an hour. Maybe you do. Now, there's another factor that you should consider because, let's be honest, you might mill ponderosa pine at 300 board feet an hour, and maybe you mill black locust at 300 board feet an hour. Should you charge the same for black locust? Well, that's a good question, and that question comes down to supply and demand. Maybe where you live, like I live in the Pacific Northwest, there's tons of softwood out here. There's really not a lot of hardwoods. English walnut, for example, I almost never see that. So supply and demand. If somebody really wants English walnut, they're going to pay more for it. They might pay 10 bucks a board foot versus $1 a board foot for ponderosa pine. And you might need to get 80 cents a board foot for ponderosa pine, but if they can go to the big box store and get it for 50 cents a board foot, well, you're not going to sell it for 80 cents a board foot, especially if it's not kiln dried and surfaced. So these are all factors you have to consider. What you do, though, is you figure out, let's say on pine you need to make 80 cents a board foot, so you put it up on CL or wherever, or Marketplace or whatever, at 80 cents a board foot, see if you sell it. And if you're making a profit, wonderful. If there's nobody selling black locust, you could increase that. How much do they want to pay for it? Then it becomes a factor of, I'd be going out on the internet, not on a social media group. I'd go out on the net, try to buy some black locust somewhere. I'm not going to buy it, but I'd go look. Black locust for sale. See what people are charging. Maybe they're only charging 5 bucks a board foot. If they are charging 5 bucks a board foot, I'd probably start around 5 bucks a board foot. Not because that's what I need to make, but because in business you're going to take losses and you're going to have wins. And that would be a win. If I get 5 bucks a board foot for something that cost me 40 cents a board foot to make, I'm a happy camper. And that ain't gouging. That don't exist in the world. That's some made up crap. There is no gouging. If you've got a baseball card from the 1940s that's never been touched, that's in mint condition, you could probably sell it for $500, and you would. And you'd be excited about it, and your friends would pat you on the back about it. For something that cost 2 cents. And everybody's excited. You've got some black locust that nobody else has, and you sell it for 50 bucks a board foot, and everybody freaks out and says that's gouging. No, it's not. It's called a free market. They didn't have to buy it. That's how the free market works. They have a choice. They can buy it or not. If you don't sell it, you're going to lower your price. So, there you go. Anyway, folks, I'm sorry I don't have any sawmilling videos for you right now. We finally got our summer weather. You know, it's actually been pretty cool this year. All the way into the middle of August, and all of a sudden it wants to be 106, 108 degrees out. We live in the desert. That's normal. Usually we could see that in June, but it took till August for us to get it. But in any case, it's been hot, and though my job ended on July 20th, so it's almost a month ago. I had a lot to do, so I've had to do all kinds of stuff and just been super busy, but I am going to get back to the sawmill. I'm going to be dragging it up to the cabin again soon in about a week, and finally going to get back to milling up there now that I've got it running better. And I've got some logs here locally to mill up that we're planning on doing in September when the weather improves a little bit. So more sawmill videos coming, lots more for the cabin. I have so much work to do at the cabin. I've got some shop stuff to show you, so we're gonna do that too. So stick around, lots more to come. And while I'm at it, folks, if you like this video, do me a favor, click that like button down there, just smash that thing. It would really help the video out. I would appreciate it greatly. Thank you very much for that. And hey, if you're not subscribed, why not subscribe? It's free. Just hit the button. It's free. You'll know when my next video comes out. So I'd appreciate it if you did that. I really would. Trust me. Helps the channel out, and I really appreciate it. All right, folks. That's all I've got for you today. The old jarhead out.